2. Well, good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. I'm Gene Perinack. Today is the 39th episode that we've been together, and we're excited to be with you today. It's going to go to send the year out with a bang. This is the end of 2020. No show next week or the week after. That's Christmas Day and New Year's Day on Friday. Hope you have a wonderful time, even if distance, with family. Use those Zoom links. Enjoy some good food. We're thankful that everyone can have some time together. Today, we are going to do our COVID Connect, our COVID news, as well as our guests today are Eli Velasquez and Heath Naquin from NIH RADx. They're strategic consultants for the program. We'll be talking with them in just a minute as well. And then we're going to do a 2020 retrospective. We've all been together through some crazy times, and I wanted to take you back through some of the history of COVID Connect and MedTech Crossroads during 2020 before we launch right into 2021 on January 8th. So after this show, enjoy the holidays, and we'll see you on January 8th. On the COVID Connect front, the numbers are continuing to rise in terms of hospitalizations in the U.S. That being said, you can see a little bit towards the top here that there may be a top in sight. In fact, our favorite site, covidtracking.com, shows this on a relatively new chart that they maintain, which says that cases are rising in 10 states, but we're starting to see a peak in 25 states. And in fact, whereas last week this number was relatively low, now falling in 21 states. So that's some pretty good news. It's a good way to go into the holidays. It's what we'd rather see than the alternative. As we always show you in Michigan, the numbers are here. The hospitalizations do seem to have peaked, and that is also good news. We seem to be on the way down with hospitalizations, and the deaths, thankfully, at least the 7-day average, has not yet topped what happened in the spring. So once again, hats off to the healthcare workers, so many of whom have we interviewed on the show, and I think one of the things that they've said is they've certainly learned how to triage this better than everybody knew how to do in the spring, and that is a great blessing to see. Since so many have said they like to see it, we're going to throw the statewide available PPE and bed tracking back up one more time for the year. And no shockers here. Not too much panic at the moment, but we do know a few weeks ago that was much higher. With that is the COVID news. And with that, I want to welcome our guests, Eli Velasquez and Heath Naquin, onto the show with us. I also want to thank Paul Reiser over at MedHealth and at TechTown for introducing all of us together, and for our friends at MishBio, as well as Arbor Hive and WMed for getting the word out today so that we can all connect and talk about what NIH's needs are for their RADx program. And we're going to hear a little bit more from Eli and Heath on this. But first of all, I'm going to stop the share here. And we've got Eli with us on video. There's Heath. Welcome, guys.
Hi, Gene. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
It's good to have you guys. And we're thankful to Paul Reiser for getting us introduced. Now, I'd like you to explain a little bit more to the audience. You guys are both strategic consultants to NIH for their RADx program that we're going to talk about in a minute. And if I understand correctly, you guys are basically doing customer discovery. The government has gone out there. They've invested a lot of money in some initiatives for COVID diagnostics. And that's really cool. And something we often have to tell people is, well, you better figure out who your customers are. How are you going to get this delivered? Who needs this? And that's what you guys are doing for the program, to try to see how do we close that last mile of the process. So we're thankful you guys are doing that. We would like today, we'll see how our audience is feeling today. We would love for today to be really interactive, because I know you guys aren't just telling a story. You guys are also asking, where are these diagnostics needed? Who needs them? What kind of businesses, municipalities, governments, et cetera, need these? And it's sort of an open-ended question. So we're going to welcome at any point today any of our listeners to chime in. Maybe you can't represent your entity officially, so maybe you do or don't want to say who you're with. That's just fine. But certainly questions and statements about, have you thought about this? Or there's a group we think we'd like to connect you with. That's one of the things we've been so proud of on MedTech Crossroads, is people getting connected and finding those connections. So if we can send you away today with a few connections that say, yeah, we should really trail that lead, we'd love to do that as an end to the year. But with that, why don't you guys give me a little introduction to yourselves as individuals and then to the RADx program.
Why don't you start off, Heath, and then I'll follow, and then I'll dive into the overview.
All right, sounds good. So thanks again, Gene, for having us, and thanks to Paul and everybody for putting us together. So my name's Heath Naquin. I have done a variety of things over the years in higher ed, innovation, entrepreneurship, both globally and across the nation. Was part of helping get RADx set up back in March when everything sort of blew up, and figuring out what that looked like and how that was going to get going. So now it's good to be involved in the actual soup making, so to speak, of that last mile part you talked about, Gene, which is super important. I will say this, even though Eli is the lawyer, I will give a legalese thing. As you mentioned, we are strategic consultants. In no way anything are we saying representing the federal government, and I'm sure Dr. Fauci or whoever else will definitely trump anything we say. So anything we say is not, that's my legal disclaimer. We are not representing the NIH in an official governmental capacity. But that said, we are intrinsically involved with the program, and we are working closely with NIH leadership to try and tease out some of these learnings across the nation and sort of figure out where that last piece goes. So with that, just learn more from all y'all. And Eli, go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll add a little bit more to the legalese. We also don't represent any of the companies that we'll be talking about today. Again, we're simply here to gather information, and by all means, feel free to reach out to us. Gene can share our contact information, and we'd be more than happy to explore a conversation. So I'm Eli Velasquez. I'm also a strategic consultant for the RADx program. Similar to Heath, we saw it kind of evolve from the very beginning, the very onset, and we also envisioned and saw where some of this was headed. So we got to see some of the initial concepts being put to work. So it's really interesting to see how it's all evolving in the marketplace. My background, as Heath mentioned, is IP law, tech transfer, innovation, angel investing, all sorts of things related to innovation and entrepreneurship. But with that, I'd like to dive in and share a little bit about the RADx initiative. I'll frame it so everybody in the audience has an overview of what we're trying to accomplish. Then Heath can dive into some of the companies that we're looking at that fall into the RADx portfolio. And then, as Gene mentioned, we definitely want this to be as much of a dialogue and exchange as possible, because that's what's really going to give us the biggest bang for our buck in this hour. So the RADx initiative stands for the Rapid Accelerated Diagnostics Initiative, which is aimed to both identify and commercialize COVID diagnostics testing, all in the attempts for us to really get back to some form of normalcy. There's a link there that you can read more about the initiative at length. But what it really consisted of was it's about a $1.8 billion initiative that started back in April to first do a national call for different technologies in this space. They went through a filtering down process of different phases with different academic and medical experts looking at the different technologies. Some of those companies and some of those projects are splintering off into different paths. But what we ended up with is a portfolio here at the end of the summer, which we call the RADx portfolio. And that's what Heath is going to describe here in a little bit. When we looked at the number of applications, there's literally thousands, but of the ones that we were narrowing down, they came across different sectors, from small business to your professors in the labs to the big ones that you hear in the mainstream media. And again, they went through various forms of review and technical validation to get to the point where we have about 22 of them in the RADx portfolio. This was underpinned by a group of, as I mentioned, medical and academic experts comprised the Consortium for Improving Medicine with Innovation and Technology, or CIMIT. And so all of these individuals, this is where Heath and I first engaged, is trying to identify other experts that we could link into the CIMIT network to be part of that review phase and part of the development phase. So this is kind of the core organization that moves a lot of the parts to the RADx initiative. These are some of the logos of the organizations that are involved with CIMIT. So again, these are very notable institutions that are part of this initiative, and Heath and I are serving as consultants to the overall program. As I mentioned, there's different technologies and different RADx type programs on how you can get certain services and products out to market to underserved populations, others going for advanced testing programs. We sit in the RADx tech component of it, so about $500,000 worth of investment into that initiative to get these tests and screens out into the marketplace. So where we sit now, I mentioned the point of care, the testing solutions that have been filtered through. The companies get funded from NIH and they go on to develop and start manufacturing all these tests. Now we're sitting in the support of the deployment of these tests. And this is the component of us doing the customer discovery. When we look at the commercialization and deployment approach, there's also moving parts within that. It's how do we create an online marketplace for supplier to meet buyer? There's a when to test calculator that's being developed. There's different playbooks and implementation guides. And then of course, there's the target audiences piece, and this is the customer discovery side. So we're looking at this from two sides. Heath and I will switch our hats based on the conversations of who we're having. On the demand side, users, customers, corporates, communities. On the demand side, the manufacturers, the aggregators, distributors. And so we're trying to find where the product market fit is, and then use a tool set like a marketplace to start to make those linkages. Heath and I are always on conversations with schools, manufacturers. It's interesting because we always hammer our entrepreneurs. These are not customers, these are institutions, but we get down to the individuals that are running and at the decision-making level for each of these kinds of customer segments. So we have our own business model canvas, and we're talking to executive directors, we're talking to association directors, chambers of commerce, economic development organizations, key manufacturers. We've run the gamut from El Paso, Denver, Arizona, Houston, Atlanta, Tennessee. I mean, we are always looking for new individuals to talk to and learn what some of their needs are when it comes to testing and screening. Again, we'll ask them some pretty kind of high level, but insightful questions of what we're trying to hammer in on to see if we can link that up with the supply side. So we then synthesize that feedback, and we're aggregating an entire set of insights, customer insights, to develop what that implementation component will be. And then that's essentially it. And then the supply side will run kind of similar conversations. We had a great call with some folks out of Tennessee yesterday. I'll have some more calls this afternoon after this webinar, just trying to understand what the capacity level is and where we can try to kind of, make that connection point. So that's the, did I stop share? Okay. Yep. So that's the RADx initiative in a nutshell. Not a complexity, but it's more about really getting out into the marketplace and fielding those needs. So with that, let me turn it over to Heath.
Yeah, thanks, Eli. And so I want to just sort of hammer a couple points home. So I know a lot of folks on this call, and we hear this quite often. I mean, our call in Tennessee yesterday, for example, the outsourced laboratories, the PCR type tests, the things that are sort of the standard right now. Everybody's making do with what is out there, obviously. And I know that there is at least I've heard all kinds of random things from some manufacturers, everything from, oh, the vaccine's coming, so we don't need to test anymore. And you're like, whoa, stop, to we just don't know what we can do practically on site. And by the time we find out, because we have a backlog 5 or 7 days, we've already had a bloom inside the factory and we have to shut down, and it costs us $100,000, $200,000, $1 million just while we're just waiting to find out what happens. So we're not in the clear on this stuff yet. And I think the point I wanted to share at the moment, and I'll put this in the chat in a moment, so let me try and share screen. When we talk about testing and diagnostics, did that work out okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Yep.
So also within sort of the NIH program, or at least the portfolio, if you will, and this is what we can publicly share right now, and part of the marketplace concept that Eli was talking about is really trying to make more specifically based on different testing modalities and needs. And there's all the stuff that goes into that, the playbooks and testing and hiring, all that stuff. But within that, basically these are this is the portfolio of what we are working on to try and match, and it really varies everything from your some kind of rapid lab-based assay that's just a super quick, not rapid in the current rapid context, but quick. I should use quick. I can't use rapid anymore. Some quick test over there. Everything to, I think everybody probably saw Lume on CNN. I mean, that was a RADx project. And so it's everything from smartphones, at-home stuff to, lab-based type things. And so I'm going to put this in the chat. All of you feel free to look at any of this. If there's any interest in the group for some specific use case that you guys may feel like, hey, this looks interesting, Eli and I are certainly able to do direct connections with those companies for you. So feel free to reach out, whatever the use case might be, and that's fine. And also just because so I'll put this in the chat in a moment, but also just because we're supposed to, so I'll do it anyway. I don't know if everybody saw this yet or not. One of the other outgrowths of the RADx initiative, which was announced this week, was this tool, which actually quite a bit of modeling went into, which is the when to test type tool, which might be useful for some of y'all, and I'll put that in the chat as well. So with that, and this is a free test, and and just to be really clear, Eli and I get no brokerage component. We have no dog in this hunt. We are literally being paid by the government to try and connect marketplace with supported projects. This is just to try and do a service and make sure that the right information is getting in the right hands. And also on the flip side, having us understand different use cases, because the things we're finding out about manufacturing issues in certain sectors, it's tremendous. I mean, we even talk about something like the food and restaurant industry. How do we work this out and open them back up again? At the end of the day, we have a solid 6 more months to get through all this stuff at the very least. And so if we can keep the testing pressure going, it's a good thing. So with that, I'm going to shut up. And Gene, if you want to tee up any questions, we're good. And I'm going to put these in the chat now.
No, guys, that's great. And actually, Heath, I wonder if you can go back over to that, keep your screen up there, and let's go back over to the projects list, because our first question is from Sven. And Sven asked, oops, let's see, I just lost it there. Let me bring it back up.
I pulled it off. Is it back up?
Let's see.
Yes.
Let me bring it back up. It's the chat window. There we go. His question was, how fast from sample to results is the quickest test in the portfolio? And we may have to scroll through this list to get any sense of that. I do see one there that's they're shooting for 30 minutes. So that was the top left one.
So I'm gonna put a caveat on all this. So all of the tests that are in this portfolio, there's 2 different things I'll mention to you, and it's a great question. We get it all the time. So the very blunt question to you, the stated goal for this project was to get, accurate 95% or better, however they did it, within 15 to 30 minutes. That's what they were looking for originally. Some of the tests are in that range, and some of them are more like 40 minutes, whatever. But these are generally, we're trying to get results in the sub-hour time frame. There are a couple of different, however it's done, whether that be you've collected it, you sent it to the lab, but the lab can run it in an hour, or it's literally done some point of care type system or something like that. Now, the caveat to that, they all do it in different ways. So, I don't, in this list, I don't believe it's there because it didn't make it this far. But for example, there was a project, and I'm dancing a little bit, so I don't want to disclose too much because I'm not supposed to. So bear with me a little bit. Where there was a sample collection method that they had. The individual test was maybe about 70-75% effective, but it did do it in like 15 minutes, but it was like literally $2 per test at most. So you can run 2 or 3 and do double positive, double negatives, and effectively you're at 95% in that range. So it just really depends. Now, I'll also mention though that the things on this portfolio have all gone through some level, an extensive level of third-party validation on their claims, as far as what is being put on the public website by now. To give you guys a sense, all of these have had some level of third-party scientific validation within the sort of project milieu, if you will. The groups that are doing scientific vetting include Emory, Northwestern Med, UMass Amherst, surprisingly. I don't know how they snuck in there, but that's fine. Mass General and Harvard Med. Yale, Hopkins, all the larger institutions you would think of. And no offense to you, Mish, I don't know what happened. I tried to connect people. It didn't happen. But all the people you would think of in medicine, they were involved in doing the third-party validation. So there's some substantial literature behind some of this stuff. If the claim is public, you can pretty much go with what is there. Now, specific use cases may be a little bit different. Again, that might be between you and the company if you have an envisioned usage, but that's something we can take offline.
That's great. I appreciate that. I want you to hold that slide, and let's go back to Eli for his screen share of those questions or target groups that you guys have thought about. And I want to ask the audience. We've got a lot of great thinkers in our audience, and I know many of them are on the call today. We need your help today before we go into the holidays. What kinds of ideas do you have? Have you run into any groups that aren't getting what they need in terms of testing? Do you have any thoughts for Eli and Heath in terms of places they should look or people they should talk to? It's been one of the great things about this audience is people making those connections. And recently, we've even made quite a number of those. So I would love to hear from our audience today. If you want to raise your hands, what questions do you have for these guys? And are there any groups that you can think of that they should be talking to who maybe have needs for testing that aren't being satisfied but are looking for it? And here we've got Eli up here. You've got.
And Gene, maybe what would be helpful is to kind of frame the kinds of individuals and how we have approached them. So one approach that we've taken is to start with economic development organizations who can then bring in some of those customer segments that I mentioned, their major manufacturers, their airport directors, school administrators, safety officers, HR personnel. So one approach has been, reaching out to the Greater Houston Partnership, Denver Economic Development, Arizona Tech Council, Albuquerque Economic Development. We're out there, and that's a very easy start for us. And then they're able to filter down into the kind of that next level. Second to that is, just kind of the one-on-ones. But when we're looking at how we refine that customer segment is a couple of different things is, are there customer segments that have a high throughput of individuals that they think that they would need to conduct these tests for? Two, how essential is it for them to be conducting tests based on the operations, or is it an essential business based on government protocols? And so we're looking at that kind of upper right-hand quadrant of companies and organizations and communities that need this. We had a great call with a group of airport executives and airport managers, and they gave us some really great insight on how the airports are trying to figure this out and where testing might come into. It's obviously high throughput, highly important, highly essential, right? And so that kind of helps frame for the people in the audience the kind of customer segments that we're talking to on the demand side.
Yeah, if I may add a couple more, if you will, use cases, and this is back to the point we said earlier about different testing modalities will enable some of these groups or organizations to continue to operate or operate better. So for example, we talked to, I should mention, one of the strategic reasons we're doing this is there's a recognition that there's certain parts of the U.S. infrastructure that need to stay open, right, to be able to operate and function. So for example, and I see stuff going on here, and yes, we will.
You're getting your feedback here. Yes,
no, it's good. It's good.
Everyone, we appreciate this.
So
we'll get to each of these.
Manufacturing is a huge component of it all, and yes, we are talking to MEP and NIST and the folks there across the nation, and trying to figure out how we can, figure out how the manufacturing extension partnerships work. There's a focus on chemicals. This is back to what Olaf's question was. Primarily because some of the chemical stuff is related to reagent stuff that is a supply issue, that then it sort of blows up from there, although plastics is also an issue, of course, as well. So we are targeting manufacturers in some of those areas, and actually food manufacturers is another thing as well. So one of the things that we are hearing, I am not a doctor at all. Please, no PhD in my name. Throw that out, Olaf. No way. Anyway, so the point is, though, so some of those different industries are really important, but also on the community side, we're hearing, and just this to help frame a little bit, so manufacturing business opening makes sense, But we're hearing stuff like, okay, we're trying to serve underserved population for school districts in K through 12. Wait a minute. The parents don't trust the test. The nurses aren't trained to do the test. Nobody knows how to sort of collect all this stuff. Nobody's reporting it appropriately. It's all turning to this big mess. And then all of a sudden, boom, it creates this huge issue where even if the tests are available, people aren't taking them. So there's all the other community issues that are happening as well that we're digging into. We talked to a school district. I talked to a school district. They have something like 5 million kids in it total. And it's like, what do you mean? They really couldn't give the tests away. And we were trying to figure out the why behind it. So there's a lot of weird dynamics in all of this that sort of get in the way of some of this stuff a little bit. I think there was one question I'm trying to make sure I answer.
I've actually made the mics of a number of people who've had comments or questions.
Go ahead.
But I also want, before that, Matthew Himes has been waiting for a while. So I want the first comment from Matthew Himes, and then I know Carrie, John, Olaf, Mr. Miss McKendrick, and Sven. Your mics are live if you'd like to make comments and questions, but let's start with Matthew and then we'll go from there.
Jane, really appreciate it. Thanks for getting everybody together. As always, this is great. Eli and Heath, it's really good to hear from both of you and understand more, where the RADx program is and deployment of these technologies. And I guess that's where my question is. So I'm with Rapid Bio. We're a local COVID testing lab. We're doing, PCR-based testing for reference labs as well as some local community sites. We have plenty of room to expand, and we're in the process of having a drive-through set up and looking at more mobile, kind of localized testing for some of the facilities that you've talked about. Restaurants would be great, but manufacturing facilities, schools, and others. So I guess my question is, in some of those technologies that you've shown, how many of those are actually ready for deployment, at scale, so we could build some of those relationships and get these testing, out into the communities.
So two different things, and Eli, pepper in if you want. So, sir, we should probably talk outside of this. So part of our role is also connecting lab providers and people that are currently working in the marketplace with some of these different technology platforms. So if there's an interest in your part on trying to maybe assume this, or it's different methods in some way, because some of these companies don't have deployment arm. So if you're a lab-based test and there's interest in trying to partner or something like that, we can help facilitate that. And we're starting to do that directly between the technology platforms and the outsourced lab groups that are doing the work on the ground. So if that's something of interest, I just want to point that out. Feel free to talk with us after this. And so that's the main thing right now, because we are talking to a host of different lab providers that are doing the work you're talking about doing. I don't know, Eli, did you want to add anything on that at the moment?
I just scrolled up on the slide. It's those folks that are helping in that supply chain of the deployment, right? So test providers, test manufacturers, collection agencies, end-to-end aggregators, distributors. So Michael, if you're fit, obviously you fit in one of those roles. We want to have that conversation with you and then kind of explore what opportunities might be.
And I think the core question was a scalability question. So our stated goal is to be able to, in January, have this portfolio deploy at least an additional 1 million. And honestly, they're planning on beating that. They're already past their targets from last month, which was getting it scaled to at least a net positive of another 500,000 or so, tests per month that could be deployed. Then now we're trying to get into the millions of tests in January. So I think if there's a company on that list, part of the RADx project is actually making sure they are able to scale, and that is what's been going on behind the scenes for the last several months. So I don't think there's anything on there that couldn't go within the next, either if not now, then within the next couple of weeks, because there is a sort of support for the critical infrastructure to allow those guys to scale up. Well, honestly, I've never seen anything move that fast on the government side, so there's plenty of will behind it. So I don't think the scaling issue is necessarily a problem. It's making sure that we're getting the last mile problem solved. So again, glad to talk to you more about it after this call or at another point. I think that'd be useful.
Feel free to connect guys through me, and we'll get you guys connected. It's one of the favorite things we love to do with this program. I know that there's a question here from Brett Johnson about the URL for the current businesses in the portfolio. Heath, if you could get that posted.
Yeah, I'll put it up there right now.
All panelists and all attendees, that would be great. I know that our friend Ken Spenser just came on with a question. I've still got potential comments from Carrie, John, Mr. and Ms. McKendrick and Olaf perhaps and Sven as well. So feel free, whoever has your mic live, go ahead. And there's
yeah, I'll go ahead. I'm Carrie Schoenig. I'm with the Great Lakes Trade Adjustment Assistance Center. We're located at the University of Michigan. We work with smaller manufacturers. That's why I asked about small manufacturers. I heard you mention larger manufacturers, but sometimes the little guys are just so busy that they need extra help, they need extra attention. The MEP network, it sounds like you are talking to the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Network.
So we are. So there's two different sides of that. So we said large primarily because that was sort of a directive originally, because try and focus on. I mean, the things like keep Tyson open and other big infrastructure type things. But we've heard we have, and maybe we didn't categorize this well. Part of the work that Eli and I are doing are talking to all different sizes of manufacturers. So we've literally talked to everything from a group that has 50 or so, but they are essential workers. They have to stay open, and that they have some of the biggest penalties, all the way up to 8,000, so everywhere in between. And we are starting to work with the NIST and the MEP network. I will say that I feel like it gets filtered a little bit in governmentese. And so part of our role is to sort of translate that a little bit. So I have talked directly to different MEP members in different states, and would be happy to talk to the group here as well if it would be useful, or representative members within that.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you for the comment.
Follow up after that. Yeah.
Hi, this is Maria McKendrick. Can I jump in with a question?
Please do. Thank you.
Jean, it's so great to see you, and thank you for putting on today's panelists. They're so knowledgeable in what they're doing. My daughter works for an upstart OEM, and they're not going to be the big OEM, but there's a plant coming online that even a loss of a couple of days can shut down and cost hundreds of thousands and millions. So I did ask for my daughter, and then there was something that is a second part to my comment and question, reaching out to the two of you, is when you talked about school districts and just things shutting down, there is a path through that, I believe. And I do have a good relationship with the director of the school board up in Pontiac. If it's a quasi-university relationship, my email is artcraft@umich.edu, artcraft@umich.edu. If I could talk offline to bring some of those to bring some programs to the Pontiac school system.
Well, just to pick on UMich a little bit, we heard also that there's a huge interest in athletic departments on keeping their athletes safe so they can play.
Makes sense.
So not just that UMich is saying like everybody, but we're seeing all kinds of weird stuff. So anyway, sorry, but yes, we would love to talk more after this. Yeah.
It was Channel 4 that was talking about the Big House was the largest stadium in Michigan, and that made the local news yesterday for, to be updated on those comments. Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Let's see. We've got others who have their mics live and may not have had a chance to comment.
This is John Cunningham, also with Rapid Bio. Just a quick question about sort of the strategy, the portfolio mix between sort of moonshots versus, optimization of, of existing technologies. I originally sort of got the sense that we didn't even look at this program because we thought it was mostly moonshots. But I saw when you were scrolling through that you did have some PCR-based, sort of scale up, deals in your portfolio. And my post in the comment was, I heard a Secretary of Education once say that sometimes a pencil can be technology, so it doesn't have to be like a supercomputer. So like, optimizing the existing testing, you have labs that are, really having difficulty with pipette tips. And that's not like a sexy technology, but it sure as hell could use a couple $1 million.
I'm on the pipette tips. I remember actually Eli and I had to figure out a way to help supply side for pipettes from I think it was New Zealand, because there was no supply left in the US on this stuff for one of the portfolio companies. It was a weird thing, but anyway, I hear you. There's all kinds of stuff in that. And so what was the question about moonshot versus not?
Yeah, the question is moonshot versus, low tech or optimization or getting stuff done in the next 6 months with what we have?
So I will not speak for the NIH, and I will not speak for anything else, anyone except for what I observed in the portfolio when this program was announced. So it was literally a call for anything that could get testing that had a potential to produce results in a timely manner, which I mentioned earlier, that could scale. Those were the criteria. I mean, really, had little. I mean, technology is important, of course. And actually, if you look, on Eli's screen, he showed another subset. So a lot of the moonshot things that were really moonshotty are actually in what's called the ATP or advanced technology component, which are sort of sitting over here. They're getting some additional support, but they're just not ready to scale yet. They're not going to be ready. That's all off there to do something else, right? And so, well, not do something else. I mean, it's just going to need another year of incubating and accelerating to get it ready for prime time. Now, so within that, I recall there was somewhere around 2,000-ish total, just random ideas of all kinds that were submitted into the initial portal at CIMMIT. I think just in very rough screening by multiple panels over time, typical panelist type thing, very scientifically focused panelists, I should say, initially anyhow, with NIH participation directly. I should also say that got narrowed to another 700, and then that got further narrowed to about 130. Now those 130 that they went through a very intensive about 2 to 3 week period of where there's literally like 10 people up in the company's business figuring out the science on due diligence was happening on science side, company side. There were checks happening with manufacturing components for manufacturing the tests if they needed to. So there's a whole bunch that went into that before we got to that final 22 that really got, okay, there's a chance to scale type thing. So whether it was moonshot or just, quote unquote, incremental improvement, didn't really matter so much. It was more, can the test scale and can you get a result, a meaningful result in the time frame that was sort of outlined? Does that help?
Sure, yeah, that's great, thanks.
Appreciate that question. Okay, I got to do a quick time check here. We got about 4 minutes left on this segment. I want to make sure we get as many of these questions and comments in as possible. So we're going to go kind of rapid fire here. We've got a question. We're going to go for the 5-second, 10-second answer here. So Matthew Himes said, is there still funding for scale up of labs just to get more testing available to the community? Is that within scope?
I can't speak to funding at all for NIH at the moment. There's, as far as I know, there's no open call on the scale up of things or anything like that. But I can't speak on behalf of that. Now, if you work out something with some of these companies and they're just interested in doing a pilot or something, that's on y'all to work out with them. And there might be opportunities there, but I can't speak to that at all.
Great, I appreciate that. We've got a question here. Has the emphasis shifted to find new platforms with novel tech? And has the aggregation or standardization of data sharing elements of these tests been addressed by RADx yet? So harmonization over these projects. Brett's line is live if you'd like to clarify that question.
Okay. Yeah, what's that mean?
Are you there, Brett?
Yeah, I'm here now.
Great. Yeah, can you clarify that question for us real quick?
It's two different questions actually in there. So the first one is, how much has the emphasis shifted in the NIH in general into new platforms and basic platform building in basic research?
So we are involved. I think I'll answer that one. I couldn't quite hear you, so I apologize. And I'm trying to be respectful of time, Gene. So very quickly, I believe that there's not an explicit quote unquote shift in new novel tech per se in the ATP or the advanced technology side of things, although we are peripherally involved with that in some way, and probably will be more involved after we get past this current op. I will also say though that, for one, this is not like an SBR, like just total out in the moon somewhere. This is really more of a, can the scale and meet need? Now on the advanced technology side of things, from what I am aware of, and again, this is one where I can't fully comment on, so don't take that with a grain of salt, please. But there is a, at the end of the day, there is an interest in using this opportunity to not only address COVID, but also general pandemic preparedness for the nation. So a lot of the ATP projects are not only focused on COVID, but multi-use things. And so those are sort of novel and platform nature from what I can tell, but I really don't know much more beyond that. As far as the data sharing element, are you talking about sharing to municipalities for results type thing?
Yes, both the registry and the return of the patient data.
So to be honest with you, from what I've heard, there is surprisingly a complete lack of want to be big brotherish on this thing and act like they are coming in to take all the data and make sure that, and give everybody a COVID card type thing that you've gotten tested. So that's gotten very political, to be blunt, as you can probably imagine. Is there data? And so I don't know where that sits at the moment. I really don't know where the data aggregation side is sitting on the test components. What we are hearing from different aggregators is they're interfacing with state groups, and that's a little different than what the RADx side is doing. So that's the best I can answer that question, I think.
Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. I want to see by any hands online. Ken Spenser had a question about CT, but CT is just a parameter of the PCR test, I believe. So we would expect that any PCR test would have that, I believe. Although I'm not sure. Are you guys experts in the PCR process?
I'm not experts on it, but I mean, I've heard enough jargon. I mean, I haven't heard of anything that doesn't have, that doesn't at least conform to current PCR standards, we'll call
standards. Good. I want to see by a quick show of hands because we want to get all these questions. And what we're going to do this week is we're also, when we send a follow-up email around, we're going to include the chat in that. If you have a specific person you want to get in touch with, whether it's somebody else who was listening to the show that made a comment, or whether it was Eli and Heath, we can do that. You can always send a email to info@intobeing.com. We can get you guys put in touch. I think there are at least a few here that wanted to follow up. A few minutes ago, we had Eli and Heath's emails direct up on the screen there, as well as the current list. Any last words for us, Eli and Heath? We really appreciate your being here today. Hopefully the connections continue after today through the follow-ups. We'd love to hear a final word from you guys.
Yeah, quickly, just encourage the connections. Obviously we're trying to move as quickly as we possibly can. So, feel free to reach out as in any way, shape, or form, email, phone call, LinkedIn. We want to hear from you. And thanks for having us, Gene. This has been great.
We appreciate having you guys. Thank you to the audience too. We appreciate.
I wanted to say thank you for the very engaged questions. Definitely, if you guys, I'll just reiterate what Eli said. And Eli actually canceled Christmas for himself. He's working on Christmas, just so I just set it up for him that way. But but in all honesty, we are trying to go fast on this. We are trying to move quickly. If there's interest in, hey, the portfolio looks interesting, how can we partner with this so we can get them into our group? Or hey, this is neat. Maybe there's a use case you haven't thought of, or hey, any of those things are useful information points at this point. So please do reach out. And again, I want to say, Gene, thank you very much for this call. And, thank you to the great questions, and please do keep the conversations going, y'all.
We're just the connector, and we sure appreciate your being here and all of our guests. I want to just give Ken Spenser, who raised his hand here, one quick chance to ask or state a question here.
Sure. Thank you so much. Listen, very interesting. I just want to let you know that I would like to connect up with you from MCIRCC at University of Michigan, because we have a breath analysis program that technology we've been working on for years. Originally focused at ARDS, but we pivoted to COVID-19, and we just got $2 million in NIH funding to continue that work. So I would love to connect up with you guys.
Yeah, no, feel free to reach out. I mean, this may not be RADx per se, but like if we can route or traffic cop in some way, glad to help where we can.
Great. Well, thank you guys. We sure appreciate having you here today, Eli and Heath. Again, please do send emails if you want to get in contact, but also if you go back to the recording of this session, you'll also find Heath and Eli's emails up on the screen about midway through. So guys, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.
All right. Have a good Christmas all. Bye.
You too. Next up, I want to do a little bit of a retrospective here. We're coming to the end of 2020, the year that we thought would never end. And all of you have made this a wonderful year in some ways, just the chance to get together as a community. We want to do a little retrospective on COVID Connect, which is where this all started. And 39 episodes later, we're well into MedTech Crossroads. And I want to join with our friend Ken Spenser, who I've just promoted to panelist today. We are naming Ken Spenser our honorary co-host for 2020. Ken is with U of M's MCIRCC. Ken, I don't know if your audio and video are there. He is.
Yep.
Those of you who are longtime listeners to the show will know that Ken has been on every single show, and he's always been the first in line with wonderful questions and wonderful comments. So, Ken, you didn't hear about this till about an hour ago, and which is just in keeping with the spirit of MedTech Crossroads, which is let's put everybody on the spot and just have fun. But you gamely said, sure, let's do it. So we wanted to name our honorary co-host of the year, and I wanted to walk through some pictures from MedTech Crossroads and COVID Connect. And maybe you and I can spend about 5 minutes here just sharing some memories of what's happened this past year. First of all, though, just give us about 10 seconds of MCIRCC, the entity that you represent.
So it's thanks, Gene. So it's a unique environment inside academia in that our primary goal is getting things to bedside, right? We're not doing primary research here, right? So and we have set up an organization that we incorporates all of the what would normally be called silos inside the university. So we cross all disciplines from LSAT to engineering to clinicians, et cetera, out of there. And we've been quite successful in moving things that are high risk, high reward through the commercialization process. And we've had some very good successes in startups as well as licenses out to various organizations. So we're really focused on things, and we fund high risk, high rewards things that could never get funded anywhere else. And our follow-on funding, I mean, we have virtually $100 million of follow-on funding from places like DOD, NIH, et cetera, out of that for some of these projects.
Great. Well, that's awesome. We're going to go through a little bit of a retrospective here. So back on, and Ken just comment, if you remember a conversation we had or an episode, feel free to chime in here with a quick memory. But back on March 27th, we had the first episode of this thing that we were calling COVID Connect. Our friends at Mich Bio, at Keystone, at the University of Michigan, including MCIRCC, as well as FFMI and Office of Technology Transfer, all got together with the MedHealth cluster, with folks from Spectrum Health. We have friends at Beaumont, at the large company Gentherm, at Grand Valley State University, folks from MEDC, Ann Arbor Spark, private sector consultants, our friends at Celsi Diagnostics, which sold to Biorad this last year, as well as at TechTown. Everybody got together, shared their mailing lists, and I think the very first call we had 230 live callers that got together. And over the months that ensued, we had Celex was on the show, our friends from Keystone, the Vesper connector out of Prisma Health was part of it. And I don't think anyone will forget the session that we had with Dr. Ing Pottinger, who told us all about the testing. You remember that one?
Yeah, in fact, I've gone back to look at that at least half a dozen times, and I've forwarded that episode to I don't know how many people, and especially now with the need for additional testing. I mean, it's just an incredible episode that she took us through there.
I feel like we're still unpacking what Dr. Pottinger taught us on that one. We're hoping to have her back in 2021. I'd like to reach out and see what her thoughts are. We've got Martin Dober up there, who was talking to us about their interim funding initiatives. Former Governor Rick Snyder and Dr. Glenn Green on the VentMI connector. Sasa Akerval, who pivoted her company.
On the VentMI thing, we were.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because of that episode, we were successful in connecting them to our DOD connections.
Oh, awesome.
And that's worked out very well for them.
That's awesome. Yeah, that was so cool to see everyone coming together. Feels like there hasn't been a show that somebody didn't get connected to somebody else, which we absolutely love. Yeah, our good friend Rodney Daniels, who was tasked with forming a COVID ward at University of Michigan, guest. The inimitable Paul Reiser, always a fun guy to have on the show. We had Pure Michigan Business Connect come on early in there. They were instrumental in forming a number of lists and trying to get people connected as well. Those were fun. Also, MCIRCC was on with you. You guys had a negative pressure. You have a negative pressure tent. Say just a couple of words about that for us, Ken.
So the negative pressure tent has been really successful in providing what we had called clinical distancing, if you will, to protect the clinicians during very high risk operations and things. And we are talking this afternoon. We expect to get EUA approval really quickly on that, which we'd love to announce probably maybe in our January.
We would love to have you come on the show in January and announce an EUA. That would be great.
Yep.
Of course, Phil Santer from Ann Arbor Spark, important part of those early shows. So many others too that we haven't mentioned here. June 5th, we switched over and renamed the show MedTech Crossroads so that as COVID during the summer was sort of dying down, we could have discussions of a more general nature. But we promised the audience we'd always come back and we'd talk about COVID whenever that was on the news. And of course, like today, we've dedicated the show to the RADx initiative. During MedTech Crossroads, we had folks like Rachel Rath from J&J, Gary Kendra, who's a local startup lawyer who's seen so many things, Lindsay Klee with Michigan SBDC. Just a couple weeks ago, Jeff Reinvelt from Renaissance Ventures. That was a fun show. I remember it was actually, I think the day we had Priya Gogoi from Celsi, who had just exited to Biorad. I believe I did that show from the trip for my 20th wedding anniversary. So I don't think I'll ever forget that show. That was, we did that one remote. And of course, Denise Graves from MEDC, as well as our friend Nikki Kennedy, who's been on many times talking to us about felt needs of frontline doctors. So we always appreciate hearing from Nikki.
So to comment on Denise Graves, I've known Denise for a while, but kind of lost contact with her. But after being on your show, we contacted her, and Denise has agreed and is now formally on the MCIRCC External Advisory Board.
I saw the news on that. Did that come through the show?
Yes, it did.
Well, awesome. We're just so pleased to hear that. That is so cool, Ken. I knew Ken would have interesting tidbits to share, so we appreciate that. Some of the folks from Rapid Bio are on the call today, and there's one of the pictures you guys shared with us when you came on. Tom Martin from Coulter, obviously, our friend Stephen from Cayman Chemical, which early on came out with a diagnostic assay, as well as Whirlpool, Christian Gianni from Whirlpool, who had been developing a PAPR for applications.
So what a cool segment that was, from paper to PAPR. I mean, what a cool marketing thing that was. That was great.
They went really fast. I think it was a great case study for what can be done when you sort of, I remember them saying that they really took off the bureaucratic links that are normally there, and they let the team run, and they really came up with something pretty cool really fast. I think that's one carry away from me, Ken. And we've watched the FDA, we've watched big companies like Whirlpool and Ford. We've had representatives from Ford on the calls. When they really put their mind to it and cut through the red tape, those companies can do some amazing things, including the agency with the EUAs and stuff. They really put some extra work in on those. So yeah, really cool.
Absolutely. And, Gene, I mean, these segments, your updates on the EUA and the FDA and the changes that have been occurring, I mean, are just invaluable. It'd be almost a whole episode in itself to kind of go through all of that stuff that's been going on.
Yeah, we'll have to talk offline about what's going to come in January, because we've got some great stuff coming for that. A couple more pictures here. Dr. Philip Levy from Wayne State was a wonderful guest to update us on what's going on in the state of Michigan. Allison London Brown from North Carolina with UVision and her extensive expertise in med devices. And of course, our friend Brent Nowak there from AMDI on the west side of the state. And there have been 3 times as many guests on this show, but that was some of the ones that I managed to screenshot before we got on today. So we're looking forward to January. We wanted to honor Ken for all of the contributions. It really makes the show when people will contribute like everyone did today. We so much appreciate that. Ken, you've always been out there front and center asking questions. Basically, if I ever needed a question to ask, you are always there to back me up and as a listener. So we just wanted to thank you so much for contributing to the show, and to everyone who's been a frequent listener. We appreciate everybody.
Gene, thank you. The thanks is all in your direction, man. pulling this together is great.
Well, we appreciate it. I'm going to stop the share here. We're just about at the 3:00 hour. We will go over, but we understand if some people have to drop off. I want to see if anyone has any questions or comments. We've always said if you have any questions about things we've talked about on the show, you're welcome to ask them. Feel free to raise a hand in the chat or in the attendee list there if you have a question, and we would be happy to get to that. I'll give 20 or 30 seconds here in case anyone has a question that they would like to ask us today. We've got all sorts of great things coming up in January. We're going to keep going with the folks. I know that Walt Young, a longtime investor in this area, is going to be one of our guests in January, as well as a lot of other things. Feel free to send your questions, your comments, whatever else you have to info@intobeing.com, because if there's something you'd like to see on the show, people you'd like to connect to, we're happy to bring them on. We're happy to have that conversation. This is all about bringing the community together. And you guys have once again proven that this is a great forum in which to do that. Thanks, David. We just saw your comment there. There's a question here from Kevin Webb. And if you have to drop off at 3, that's fine. Go ahead. We're thankful to have you here. I'm going to entertain this question from Kevin Webb for just a minute. Specifically, any lists about expirations? Kevin, I'm going to make your microphone live here to just understand what your question is better.
Great. Hi, Gene. How you been?
Good. How you doing, Kevin?
Hey, doing well. I just wanted to thank you. I caught you from your second show, and now it's come full circle. I'm now wearing warmer clothes like I was, and it's obviously snowing here in Ohio. So it brings me back to the early days of COVID Connect. So thank you.
No, we appreciate it. You had a question about EUAs and ventilators.
Yes. So getting some chatter in our business about possibly helping some folks out in this regard. And I'm just cautious because I wanted to see about the, if there's a way to find out, when is a deadline? What does that look like as far as when this expires? Or is that even the proper terminology? Does in fact the EUA for a ventilator project expire?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. We can follow up on the specific details, but basically ever since the beginning, FDA came out and they've been very consistent in it. They said that for the duration of the public health emergency that's been declared, the EUAs are effective. And they basically have the same justification for every single EUA, whether it's a mask or it's a ventilator. And what they basically said was for the duration of the public health emergency, as long as these criteria are met, this is going to be valid. Caveat, the minute the public health emergency is over, that EUA is over. And so no one knows when that's going to end. I think what we've seen with ventilators has been that we're not in the crunch that we thought we were. At the beginning, everyone was using the standard practice to say, well, if your pulse ox has dropped down and some other things, and I'm not a doctor, so that's not legal or medical advice.
Okay.
Then we're going to stick you on a ventilator, even if it turns out later we discover, that wasn't actually the right or best solution. So the ventilator usage hasn't been as much of an issue come fall, and certainly during the summer, but come fall, it was nowhere near the issue that it was in the spring when best practices indicated that we should stick you on a ventilator sooner than it turns out was necessarily a good thing. Right. So there's two questions there then. One is, when is the public health emergency over? We can't tell you, but certainly not yet. Number two is, what is the demand for and advisability of anything short of a full-featured ventilator? And I think I will wager a guess that the EUAs for ventilators are going to be less hot, and therefore FDA will feel less urgency on them, because I do not believe that there's as much of a need for those now. But we could follow up and chat about that afterwards.
Okay. Well, I do appreciate it, and you and I have arrived in the same camp. I mean, thankfully, we in the world do not need as many as we thought we did. So thankfully, in that regard, and we'll get through this time in history, and really comes down to what we learned in college: supply and demand. So I hear you. I appreciate it.
That's exactly it. Hey, Kevin, since I've got you here, and since you were here since show number 2, and this is a day of reminiscences, what we could use from you is a thank you so much for being here. Thanks for watching MedTech Crossroads. Have a great rest of 2020. see you in 2021. Can you do that for me?
Well, I would be honored, and I don't know, it's tough to follow you, but everyone, it has been an absolute experience being on here with Gene throughout this time, and we'll all remember back and reflect. And Gene, thank you and your team for getting us through. Looking forward to 2021. Let's get there and not look back. Thank you, brother.
Thanks, Kevin. We'll see you all on January 8th for the next episode of MedTech Crossroads. Bye-bye.